Hello and welcome to English Stories with Ella. I'm Ella and I'm so happy you found my channel. Today I'm thrilled to introduce you to a very special story, The Hidden Valley. Welcome to The Hidden Valley, a journey to fluent English. This audiobook has been specially designed to help you improve your English listening skills in an engaging and enjoyable way. As you follow the adventures of our main character, Maya, you'll be exposed to natural English conversations, various accents, and a wide range of vocabulary. The story progresses gradually in complexity, allowing you to build your comprehension skills as you go. Remember, the best way to improve is to listen regularly, even if you don't understand everything at first. Let's begin our journey together. Chapter 1. An Unexpected Letter. Maya Anderson stared at the letter in her hands, reading it for the third time. The cream-coloured envelope had arrived that morning, addressed in elegant handwriting that she didn't recognise. It was postmarked from a small town called Willowbrook that she had never heard of before. Dear Miss Anderson, the letter began, I am writing to inform you that your great-aunt, Elizabeth Hartwell, has recently passed away at the age of 92. As her closest living relative, you have inherited her property in Willowbrook, including her home and all its contents. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss the details of your inheritance. The letter was signed by a lawyer named Richard Thompson, with a phone number and email address at the bottom of the page. Maya sank into her kitchen chair, completely stunned. She had never known she had a great-aunt named Elizabeth. Her parents had rarely spoken about their extended family, and both had died in a car accident when Maya was in college. At 28, she was used to being on her own, but the idea that she had family she'd never known about made her feel strangely hollow. The small apartment in Boston where she had lived for the past 5 years suddenly felt too cramped. Maya worked as a freelance graphic designer, which meant she could work from anywhere with a decent internet connection. The timing couldn't have been better or more confusing. Just yesterday, her landlord had informed her that the building was being sold, and all tenants would need to move out within 60 days. Was this inheritance some kind of sign? Maya wasn't usually superstitious, but the coincidence seemed too perfect to ignore. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the letter. Thompson Legal Services. How may I help you? A friendly female voice answered. Yes, hello, Maya said, her voice slightly shaky. My name is Maya Anderson. I received a letter from Richard Thompson about an inheritance from someone named Elizabeth Hartwell. Oh, Miss Anderson, we've been hoping to hear from you. Mr. Thompson has been waiting for your call. Please hold while I transfer you. After a brief moment of silence and soft classical music, a deep male voice came on the line. Miss Anderson, thank you for calling. I'm Richard Thompson. I was your great-aunt Elizabeth's attorney for many years. Mr. Thompson, I have to be honest with you, Maya said. I never knew I had a great-aunt Elizabeth. Are you sure there hasn't been some mistake? There was a brief pause before the lawyer responded. No mistake, Miss Anderson. Your great-aunt was quite a private person. She was your maternal grandmother's sister, and from what I understand, there was some kind of family disagreement many years ago that led to them losing touch. Elizabeth never married or had children of her own, but she kept track of your family over the years. She knew about your parents' passing, and she's been following your career as a designer with great interest and pride. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The idea that someone had been watching her life from afar, someone connected to her by blood, was both comforting and unsettling. What exactly did she leave me? Maya asked, trying to process this new information. Quite a substantial inheritance, Mr. Thompson replied. Her home is a beautiful Victorian house on the edge of Willowbrook, completely paid for. It sits on about 5 acres of land, with gardens and a small orchard. Additionally, there's a cottage on the property that she used to rent out to tourists in the summer months. Everything is in excellent condition. Elizabeth was very particular about maintenance. Maya's mind was racing. A house, land. This was far more than she had expected. There's also a financial component, Mr. Thompson continued. I'll go into more detail when we meet in person, but suffice it to say that your great-aunt made some very wise investments over her lifetime. You won't have to worry about money for quite some time, if ever. Maya nearly dropped the phone. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to ordinary people like her. Miss Anderson, are you still there? Mr. Thompson asked after a moment of silence. Yes, sorry, Maya replied quickly. This is just a lot to take in. You said Willowbrook? Where exactly is that? It's a small town in western Massachusetts, about 2 hours from Boston. Quite picturesque, especially in the autumn. The town itself has about 2,000 residents. It's quiet, but there's a strong sense of community there. Maya thought about her current situation, the impending eviction, her flexible work arrangement, her lack of close ties in Boston. Perhaps this unexpected inheritance was exactly the fresh start she needed. When would I need to come to Willowbrook? She asked, her decision already half made. The sooner the better, if it's convenient for you, Mr. Thompson said. There are papers to sign, and I think you'll want to see the property for yourself before making any decisions about whether to keep it or sell it. I could drive up this weekend, Maya offered, surprising herself with her eagerness. That would be excellent. Why don't you plan to come to my office on Saturday morning, say around 10? We can go through the paperwork and then I can take you to the house. They arranged the details, and after hanging up, Maya sat in silence for several minutes, trying to absorb everything she had just learned. She had inherited a house and financial security from a relative she had never known existed. It seemed like something out of a movie, not real life. With a sudden burst of energy, Maya opened her laptop and searched for information about Willowbrook, Massachusetts. The town's website showed charming images of a quintessential New England community, a town square with a white gazebo, historic buildings with colourful awnings, tree-lined streets with beautiful old homes. There were listings for local events, farmers' markets, and community theatre productions. As Maya scrolled through the photos, she felt a strange sense of familiarity, almost as if she had been there before, though she knew that was impossible. Still, something about Willowbrook called to her, like a distant memory trying to surface. That night, as she packed a small suitcase for her weekend trip, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change dramatically. She had always lived cautiously, making practical, sensible choices. Taking over a house in a town she'd never visited, based solely on a letter from a stranger about a great-aunt she'd never met, was completely out of character for her. Yet somehow it felt right. As she drifted off to sleep, Maya dreamed of a Victorian house surrounded by apple trees, with windows that seemed to watch her like knowing eyes. In the dream, the front door stood open, welcoming her home. Chapter 2. Willowbrook. The drive to Willowbrook took just over 2 hours, but to Maya it felt like a journey to another world. As she left the bustling highways around Boston behind, the landscape gradually transformed. Dense suburbs gave way to scattered rural communities, and finally to rolling hills covered in the vibrant reds and golds of autumn foliage. Maya followed her GPS along increasingly narrow roads, watching as the scenery became more picturesque with each passing mile. The morning sun filtered through the colourful canopy of leaves overhead, creating patterns of light and shadow on the road before her. In 500 feet, turn right onto Maple Street. You have reached your destination, the robotic voice of her GPS announced as Maya approached the town of Willowbrook. She made the turn and found herself on a charming main street that looked like it belonged in a postcard. Historic buildings lined both sides of the road, their facades maintained with obvious care. There were small shops with colourful awnings, a cosy-looking cafe with outdoor seating, and a bookstore with a display of local authors in the window. People strolled along the sidewalks, stopping to chat with neighbours or to admire the seasonal decorations that adorned many of the storefronts. Several pedestrians glanced at Maya's car as she drove slowly through town, and a few even waved as if they had been expecting her. Following Mr. Thompson's directions, Maya continued through the centre of town and turned onto a quieter side street where she found the law office housed in a converted Victorian home. She parked her car in the small lot beside the building and took a moment to collect her thoughts before going inside. The office of Thompson Legal Services was warm and inviting, more like a comfortable living room than a sterile law firm. A woman in her 50s looked up from the reception desk and smiled widely as Maya entered. "You must be Maya Anderson," she said warmly. "I'm Patricia, Mr. Thompson's assistant. We spoke on the phone. It's so lovely to meet you in person." "Thank you," Maya replied, surprised by the friendly welcome. "It's nice to meet you too." "Richard is expecting you. Let me just let him know you're here." Patricia pressed a button on her desk phone. "Richard, Miss Anderson has arrived." Almost immediately a door opened and a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes emerged. He looked to be in his early 60s, dressed in a tweed jacket with leather patches at the elbows. Exactly what Maya would have expected a small-town lawyer to look like. "Miss Anderson, welcome to Willowbrook," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Thompson. Please, come into my office." Maya followed him into a comfortable room lined with bookshelves. A large window overlooked a garden that was still vibrant with late blooming flowers. Mr. Thompson gestured for her to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "How was your drive?" he asked as he settled into his own chair. "Very pleasant," Maya answered. "The fall colours are beautiful here." "Indeed they are. Willowbrook is at its most spectacular in autumn, though every season has its charms." He smiled, then his expression became more serious. "Before we get to the paperwork, I wanted to tell you a bit more about your great-aunt Elizabeth. I think it might help you understand why she chose to leave everything to you, despite the fact that you never met." Maya nodded, eager to learn more about this mysterious relative. "Elizabeth Hartwell was one of the most remarkable women I've ever known," Mr. Thompson began. "She moved to Willowbrook in her 30s after working as a professor of literature at Smith College. She bought the house on Orchard Lane and quickly became an integral part of the community. She volunteered at the library, taught adult education classes, and was involved in various conservation efforts to protect the natural beauty of this area." He paused, his eyes focused on a memory. "She was brilliant, but never condescending. She had a way of making everyone feel valued, regardless of their education or background, and she was fiercely independent. In an era when women were expected to marry and focus on home life, Elizabeth chose a different path. She lived life entirely on her own terms. Maya found herself leaning forward, captivated by this description of a woman who seemed both familiar and fascinating. "So why me?" she asked. "If she kept track of my family, surely she knew about other relatives too." Mr. Thompson nodded. "She did. But about 5 years ago, Elizabeth came across an article featuring your design work. She showed it to me, quite proud. She said, 'Richard, this young woman has the same spirit I had at her age. She's forging her own path.' She kept following your career after that, collecting articles and printouts of your work. I believe she saw herself in you, Miss Anderson." Maya felt a lump forming in her throat. The idea that this accomplished woman she had never met had recognized something in her, had felt a connection strong enough to make her heir, was deeply moving. "Now," Mr. Thompson said, opening a folder on his desk, "let's discuss the details of your inheritance." Over the next hour, Maya learned the extent of what Elizabeth had left her. The house, known locally as Hartwell Cottage, despite being a full-sized Victorian, was worth a considerable sum on its own. The smaller guest cottage on the property had been consistently rented out to tourists and generated a steady income. There were also investments, savings accounts, and even a collection of rare books that had been appraised at a significant value. By the time they had gone through all the paperwork, Maya's head was spinning. From being concerned about finding a new apartment in Boston's expensive rental market, she had suddenly become a woman of considerable means, with property and investments that would allow her financial freedom she had never imagined. "This is overwhelming," she admitted as she signed the last document. Mr. Thompson smiled kindly. "Elizabeth anticipated that you might feel that way. She left you a letter to be given to you after the legalities were complete." He handed Maya an envelope with her name written on it, in flowing script. "I'll give you a moment of privacy to read it," he said, standing up. "When you're ready, I'll take you to see the house." Once alone, Maya carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "My dear Maya, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have learned of your inheritance. I imagine you must be feeling quite bewildered by all of this, and perhaps even wondering if there has been some mistake. Let me assure you that there is no mistake. Though we have never met in person, I have watched your journey from afar with great interest and pride. The rift between your grandmother and me was unfortunate, but family disagreements often are. She was stubborn, and so was I. By the time I was ready to reconcile, too many years had passed, and pride kept me from reaching out. It is one of my few regrets. But this letter is not about regrets. It is about connections. When I saw your work featured in that design magazine some years ago, I recognized something in you that reminded me of myself at your age, a creative spirit, an independent mind, a determination to make your own way in the world. I began to follow your career, and the more I learned about you, the more certain I became that you were the right person to entrust with my legacy. Hartwell Cottage has been my sanctuary for over 50 years. It is more than just a house. It is a place where I found peace, inspiration, and purpose. My hope is that it might become the same for you if you choose to stay. If not, I understand. You must follow your own path, wherever it leads. In the attic, you will find journals I have kept throughout my life. They are yours now to read or not, as you wish. Perhaps they will help you understand who I was, and maybe even shed some light on who you are. Welcome to Willowbrook, my dear. Whether it becomes your home or simply a brief chapter in your story, know that you carry with you the strength and spirit of the women who came before you, even those you never had the chance to meet. With much love and hope for your future, your great aunt Elizabeth. Maya wiped away tears as she folded the letter and carefully tucked it back into its envelope. She had never felt such an immediate connection to someone she had never met. Elizabeth's words resonated deeply, as if they had awakened something that had been dormant inside her. A gentle knock at the door pulled Maya from her thoughts. Mr. Thompson peeked in. "Ready to see the house?" Maya nodded, unable to trust her voice just yet. She gathered her things and followed the lawyer out to his car, a well-maintained older model Volvo. As they drove through Willowbrook, Mr. Thompson pointed out landmarks: the public library where Elizabeth had volunteered, the community centre where she had taught classes, the local diner that had been her favourite place for Sunday breakfast. "Everyone in town knew Elizabeth," he explained. "You'll probably find that many people will want to meet you, to share their memories of her. She was well loved here." They turned on to a quiet lane lined with mature maple trees, their leaves creating a canopy of gold and crimson overhead. At the end of the lane, Mr. Thompson slowed the car and turned into a long driveway partially hidden by hedges. "Here we are," he announced as the house came into view. "Hartwell Cottage." Maya gasped. The house from her dream stood before her, a stately Victorian with a wide porch wrapping around the front, painted a soft blue with white trim and gingerbread detailing. A tower room rose from one corner with windows that seemed to look out in all directions. The front garden was a riot of autumn colours, with late blooming flowers and ornamental grasses swaying gently in the breeze. "It's beautiful," Maya whispered, overcome with a strange sense of familiarity. "Wait until you see inside," Mr. Thompson said with a smile. Elizabeth had exquisite taste. He parked the car and led Maya up the stone path to the front door. As he unlocked it, Maya felt a shiver of anticipation run through her. She was about to step into the home of a woman she had never met, but with whom she felt an inexplicable connection. The door swung open, and Maya stepped across the threshold into her new life. Chapter 3. Secrets Within Walls. The interior of Hartwell Cottage was even more captivating than its exterior. Maya stood in the entryway, taking in the sight of gleaming hardwood floors, high ceilings adorned with intricate mouldings, and walls painted in soft, welcoming colours. A grand staircase curved up to the second floor, its banister polished to a warm glow by decades of hands sliding along its surface. Elizabeth believed that a home should be both beautiful and comfortable, Mr. Thompson said as he watched Maya's awed expression. "Nothing too precious to be touched or lived with." The lawyer led her through the first floor, which included a formal living room with a fireplace, a cosy library lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a dining room that could easily seat 12, and a kitchen that had been modernised without sacrificing the home's historic character. "The kitchen was renovated about 5 years ago," Mr. Thompson explained. "Elizabeth loved to cook and entertain. She hosted a dinner party for close friends every month right up until the last year of her life." Maya ran her hand along the marble countertop, trying to imagine her great-aunt preparing meals in this space, filling the house with delicious aromas and laughter. The tour continued upstairs, where they visited 4 bedrooms, each with its own distinct character. The master suite was particularly impressive, with a sitting area nestled in the tower that Maya had observed from outside. Large windows offered views of the surrounding property from 3 directions. This was Elizabeth's favourite spot, Mr. Thompson said as they stood in the tower room. She would sit here for hours reading or simply watching the changing seasons. She called it her thinking tower. From these windows, Maya could see the extent of the property, gardens giving way to an orchard of apple and pear trees, and beyond that, a meadow that sloped gently down to what appeared to be a small stream. In the distance, wooded hills created a natural boundary. The autumn colours made the scene look like an impressionist painting. "It's perfect," Maya said softly, feeling as if she had stepped into a dream. "There's one more thing to show you," Mr. Thompson said. "The attic." He led her to a narrow staircase at the end of the hallway. "Elizabeth mentioned her journals in her letter to you, didn't she? They're up here." The attic was unlike any Maya had seen before. Rather than a dusty, cluttered space used for storage, it had been converted into a charming room with sloped ceilings, dormer windows, and built-in window seats. A large desk stood under one of the windows with a comfortable chair pulled up to it. Bookshelves lined one wall, and a cosy armchair with a reading lamp created an inviting nook in one corner. This was Elizabeth's private sanctuary, Mr. Thompson explained, her writing room. Very few people were ever invited up here. Maya's attention was drawn to a row of leather-bound books on one of the shelves. Each was labelled with a year spanning from 1962 to 2021. "Her journals," Mr. Thompson confirmed, following Maya's gaze. 60 years of Elizabeth's thoughts, observations, and experiences. She was quite disciplined about writing every day. Maya approached the shelf, running her fingers lightly over the spines of the journals. These books contained the life story of a woman who, until yesterday, she hadn't even known existed. Yet somehow she felt a profound connection to her great aunt, as if Elizabeth had reached across time to touch her life. "I'll leave you to explore on your own for a bit," Mr. Thompson said kindly. "Take all the time you need. I'll be downstairs when you're ready to discuss what comes next." After the lawyer left, Maya stood in the centre of the attic, slowly turning to take in every detail. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. The room had a peaceful quality, as if it existed slightly outside of normal time. Drawn to the desk, Maya noticed a single journal lying open, as if someone had been reading it recently. She approached cautiously, feeling slightly like an intruder despite knowing that everything in this house now belonged to her. The journal was dated 2016 and the page it was open to had an entry from early October, October 5th, 2016. I saw Maya's work featured in Design Quarterly today. Her illustrations for that children's book are simply magical, full of wonder and whimsy, yet with a depth that will speak to adults as well as children. I've ordered a copy of the book, though I have no children to read it to. Perhaps someday Maya will have children, and the book can be passed down, a creation returning to its creator's family. It's strange to feel such pride in someone I've never met, and yet I do. I see echoes of myself in her, the creative spirit, the independent streak that seems to run in the women of our family. My sister never understood my choices, but I think Maya might. Sometimes I imagine meeting her, inviting her here to Willowbrook, showing her the gardens and the orchard, telling her stories of our family, But old habits are hard to break, and I've lived too long with my walls up. Dr. Reynolds says I should reconsider, that it's not too late to reach out, but what would I say after all these years? Hello, I'm your great-aunt Elizabeth, the family black sheep that no one talks about. No, better to watch from afar. And yet... Maya felt tears welling in her eyes as she gently closed the journal. Elizabeth had wanted to reach out to her, had felt the same connection that Maya now felt, but something had held her back. Regret for a meeting that never happened washed over Maya, followed by gratitude that, in her own way, Elizabeth had found a means to connect with her after all. Wiping away her tears, Maya noticed a small wooden box on a shelf near the desk. It was intricately carved with a pattern of leaves and vines, and something about it called to her. She carefully lifted it down and placed it on the desk. The box wasn't locked, and when Maya opened it, she found a collection of old photographs, letters tied with faded ribbon, and a small velvet pouch. She gently removed one of the photographs, a black and white image of two young women, arms linked, smiling broadly at the camera. They looked to be in their late teens or early 20s, standing in front of what appeared to be a college building. Maya turned the photograph over and read the inscription on the back, Elizabeth and Margaret, Smith College, 1958. Margaret, that had been her grandmother's name. Maya stared at the image, studying the faces of these two young women who shared her blood. She could see similarities between herself and both of them, her grandmother's eyes, Elizabeth's smile. She carefully returned the photograph to the box, making a mental note to explore its contents more thoroughly later. The velvet pouch drew her curiosity next. It was heavier than she expected, and when she loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into her palm, she found herself holding a key. It was old and ornate, not like any modern key, and Maya had no idea what it might unlock. After returning everything to the box, Maya selected the journal from 2021, Elizabeth's final year, and took a seat in the armchair by the window. She opened to a random page and began to read. June 15th, 2021. The dreams have returned, more vivid than before. I find myself walking through the gardens at night, drawn to the old stone wall at the edge of the property. In these dreams, the wall isn't a boundary, but a gateway. Beyond it lies a valley shrouded in mist, with lights twinkling in the distance like earthbound stars. I know, even in the dream, that something important awaits me there, something I've been seeking all my life without fully understanding what it is. I've asked Iris if the dreams mean anything, but she just smiles in that mysterious way of hers and says, "All dreams mean something, Elizabeth. The question is whether we're brave enough to discover what." Cryptic as always, but then that's why I value her friendship. She sees the world differently than most. I've decided to include Hartwell Cottage in my will to Maya. Richard thinks I should reconsider that leaving everything to someone I've never met could lead to complications. But my mind is made up. I feel it in my bones. She is the one who will understand this place, who will appreciate not just the house but its secrets. Perhaps she will even find what I've been looking for all these years. The key is ready for her. I've placed it in the box with the old photographs. Will she know what to do with it? I believe she will, when the time is right. Maya closed the journal, her heart racing. Elizabeth had left her a key, the very one she had just held in her hand. But what did it unlock? And what were these secrets Elizabeth believed Maya would understand? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the attic door. Mr. Thompson stood there looking apologetic for the intrusion. "I don't mean to rush you," he said, "but I wanted to show you the guest cottage and the grounds before it gets dark. And there's someone I'd like you to meet, Iris Blackwood. She was Elizabeth's closest friend in Willowbrook, and she's been looking after the gardens since your great-aunt's passing." Maya carefully returned the journal to its place on the shelf and picked up the wooden box, deciding to take it with her for further exploration later. "I'm ready," she said, though in truth she felt anything but ready. In just a few hours her life had been completely upended, filled with new possibilities and mysterious questions. The mention of Iris, the same woman from Elizabeth's journal entry, had sent a shiver of anticipation through her. As they descended the stairs, Maya clutched the wooden box to her chest, feeling as if she were carrying not just physical objects, but the beginning threads of a story that had been waiting for her to discover it. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the garden as Maya followed Mr. Thompson down a winding stone path that led away from the main house. October flowers, asters, chrysanthemums, and dahlias created bursts of colour among the ornamental grasses and shrubs, turning to their autumn hues. Elizabeth was passionate about gardening, Mr. Thompson explained as they walked. She designed this landscape herself, with help from Iris, of course. The garden has been featured in several magazines over the years. Maya could see why. There was a harmonious flow to the space, with different rooms created by strategic plantings and small architectural elements, like trellises and stone walls. It wasn't formal or rigid. Instead, it had a naturalistic feel, as if the plants had chosen their own perfect locations while still conforming to some greater, unseen design. "How big is the property?" Maya asked, trying to get a sense of the scale. "Just over 5 acres, Mr. Thompson replied. "The gardens take up about an acre around the house. Then there's the orchard, which is another acre or so. The rest is mostly meadow that slopes down to Willow Creek, with a small wooded area at the far boundary." They rounded a bend in the path and came upon a charming cottage that looked like it had stepped out of a fairy tale. It was much smaller than the main house, with a steep roof, shuttered windows, and a front door painted a cheerful red. Climbing roses, mostly finished blooming for the season but still bearing a few late flowers, framed the entrance. "This is the guest cottage," Mr. Thompson said. "Elizabeth originally used it as a studio, but about 15 years ago she converted it into a rental property. It's quite popular with tourists, especially during the summer and fall. It's currently vacant, but it's booked solid for the next 2 weekends for leaf peepers." "Leaf peepers?" Maya asked with a smile. "Tourists who come to see the fall foliage," he explained. "It's a significant source of income for many businesses in town." The inside of the cottage was as charming as its exterior. A single large room served as both living area and bedroom, with a small but well-equipped kitchen in one corner and a modern bathroom tucked behind a door. Large windows let in plenty of light and offered views of the gardens and, in the distance, the main house. "It's perfect," Maya said, already imagining how she might update the decor while maintaining its cosy appeal. "The cottage brings in quite a bit of rental income," Mr. Thompson said. "Elizabeth charged $200 per night during peak seasons, and it was usually booked solid from May through October." They left the cottage and continued along the path, which now led toward what appeared to be an orchard. As they approached, Maya saw a figure moving among the trees, a woman with long silver hair pulled back in a braid, wearing gardening clothes and carrying a basket. "That's Iris," Mr. Thompson said, raising his hand in greeting. "Iris, come meet Elizabeth's great niece." The woman looked up, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun. She set her basket down and walked toward them with a graceful, unhurried gait that suggested someone completely at ease in her own body. As she drew closer, Maya could see that she was older than she had first appeared, probably in her late 60s or early 70s, but there was a timeless quality about her, an energy that seemed at odds with her age. "You must be Maya," Iris said when she reached them. Her voice was warm and melodious, with an accent Maya couldn't quite place. "Elizabeth told me all about you." Maya was startled. "You knew about me before she died?" Iris smiled, her eyes, a striking shade of amber, crinkling at the corners. "Elizabeth and I had no secrets from each other. She showed me your work years ago, very proud of her talented great niece. There was something both disconcerting and comforting about meeting someone who had known about her when she had been completely unaware of their existence." Maya didn't quite know how to respond. "Iris has been looking after the gardens since Elizabeth's passing," Mr. Thompson explained, filling the silence. "She's a bit of a plant whisperer. Even has her own nursery on the other side of town, specialising in heirloom and native species." "The gardens were Elizabeth's passion," Iris said. "I couldn't bear to see them neglected. I've been coming by 3 times a week to keep things tidy." She gestured to the basket she had left under one of the trees. "Just harvesting the last of the apples. Elizabeth would want them used." "I don't know anything about gardening," Maya admitted. "I've never had more than a few house plants, and even those tend to suffer from neglect when I get busy with work." Iris's smile widened. "Everyone starts somewhere. Plants are patient teachers." She glanced at the wooden box Maya was still carrying. "I see you found Elizabeth's memory box." Maya looked down at the box in her hands, then back at Iris. "Yes, it was in the attic. I hope it's okay that I took it." "Of course it is. Everything here belongs to you now." Iris's gaze was knowing, almost as if she could see right through Maya to her innermost thoughts. "Did you find the key?" Maya's breath caught. "Yes, but I don't know what it opens." Iris nodded, as if this was exactly the answer she had expected. "You will when the time is right." Elizabeth was a firm believer in perfect timing. Mr. Thompson checked his watch. "I should be getting back to the office. Patricia will be wondering what's become of me." He turned to Maya. "Would you like me to drive you back to your car?" Maya hesitated, looking around at the beautiful property that was now hers. The thought of returning to her hotel room in town seemed unappealing compared to spending more time exploring her inheritance. "Actually, if it's all right, I think I'll stay a bit longer," she said. "I can walk back to town later. It's not far, is it?" "About a mile," Mr. Thompson confirmed. "An easy walk, especially in this weather." "I'd be happy to show you more of the grounds," Iris offered. "And I can point out a shortcut back to town through the meadow." Mr. Thompson seemed satisfied with this arrangement. He handed Maya a set of keys to the house and cottage. "These are yours now. I've written the alarm code on this card." He passed her a small business card with a 4-digit number scribbled on the back. "If you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to call. My number is on there as well." After the lawyer had departed, Maya turned to Iris, feeling slightly awkward. "Thank you for taking care of the gardens. They're beautiful." "It was my pleasure. Elizabeth and I shared a love of growing things. Iris gestured toward the orchard. Whoa! Thank you so much for watching today's story. I hope you enjoyed it and picked up some new English words and phrases along the way. If you loved this story, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with friends who are also learning English.